Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, Merrick Garland, the attorney general, and Joe Biden, the man that both of them work for, just got spanked across the butt with a leather belt by the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision. Early this morning, the Supreme Court at 10:25 in the morning issued the most anticipated decision of this entire session, whether a president of the United States has full or even partial immunity from his acts in office. Now, this is something that the Supreme Court really hasn't had to chime in on with regard to criminal charges for our entire history, because no president in our history has ever had the temerity to bring criminal charges up against his predecessor. It took Joe Biden. It took the bitter, despicable, angry Joe Biden and his enablers in the Democratic Party to even bring this issue up, because he was so fearful of Donald Trump. He was so bitter and angry at Donald Trump and you, the voters who supported Donald Trump, that he decided to put the full weight of the federal government judicial system against Donald Trump, to throw him in jail, to tie him up in court, to paint him as a criminal so that he could win, so Joe Biden could win the election this November. And this morning, it all flew back in Joe Biden's face. Here's a look as the opinion came down. Under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential power entitles a former president to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. We'll get into the details of that in just a moment and what that really means and how it may be interpreted and applied specifically to Donald Trump and to other presidents, past, present, and future, in just a moment. But this 6-3 decision, for the most part, halts the criminal prosecution of Donald Trump with regard to anything associated with January 6th and the 2020 campaign. It also probably puts a halt to the investigation into his classified document case, which was already sort of suspended, and it probably stops Fani Willis's case down in Atlanta, although that one has also pretty much been suspended as well. Here's how the team at Fox News and Jonathan Turley in particular reacted.
Of the justices in politics. Let me go to you, Jonathan Turley, for a reaction to this decision so far.
Well, this is along the lines of what many of us anticipated, that the court did not go with absolute immunity on everything, but did say that there's absolute immunity when it comes to core constitutional powers. We're still going through the opinion to see if there's any assistance on where that line is to be drawn. This case is going to have to go back to the district court, which is going to have to try to sort of thread this needle to determine what in the case would not fall under these protections. But this is obviously a win for President Trump, in the sense that the special counsel was arguing, as with the lower court, that there was very little immunity here to be concerned with. The counsel for the government was assuring the court that they really didn't have much to be concerned with here in terms of any changes in the status of the case. That's clearly not what won the day. The court here is saying that we do need lines here drawn to protect presidents, so they have some breathing room. And you have to sort of wonder how the context affected the justices. I mean, if they want to look at the implications of leaving presidents without protection, they just need to look around the country. Even though Manhattan was not a federal case, it was a political prosecution in the view of many of us that was rather raw and open. And so this is a context that must have concentrated the minds of these justices as they did what Justice Gorsuch said and tried to write for the ages, to have something not for this case, but for future cases and future presidents.
Trey Gowdy, how does this, do we think, as we're still going through this, impact Jack Smith's case?
All right. Well, the impact on Jack Smith's case is they have to go back to the lower court now, and charge by charge by charge, Jack Smith has to explain how his charges against Donald Trump for his actions on January 6th do not fall under official acts of his presidency. Now, we'll dive deeper into that coming up in just a sec, because it's important for you to have facts so that you can apply this specifically to this situation, and also the wider reaching aspects of this. Because here's the thing, you're going to see from Democrats and the left all today, oh, this is a delay tactic. This is a delay tactic. They're just trying to push this off until after the election. No, these are important constitutional issues that are being decided here. You don't play fast and loose with the Constitution. You don't play fast and loose with criminal justice in this country just so you can punish your political opponent because you don't like him, without having it actually be determined by higher courts and the Supreme Court ultimately, as it did today, as to whether you are acting recklessly and putting our Constitution through the shredder. Let's be clear here. Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, Merrick Garland, the attorney general, and Joe Biden, the man that both of them work for, just got spanked across the butt with a leather belt by the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision. And the Supreme Court said today that what you were trying to do to Donald Trump is a violation of the separation of powers in our Constitution. Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, and Jack Smith have been twisting, shredding, and using the Constitution as toilet paper for their own political ambitions to harm Donald Trump and to keep you from being able to vote for Donald Trump. That's what the Supreme Court said today. Who's angry today at this? The Biden people, Democrats. Alina Habba, the lawyer for President Trump, chimed in as well on Fox News.
Of course, it is a good day when the Supreme Court recognizes constitutional rights of presidents and the executive branch, but we should never have been in this situation to start with. This is a disgrace to America. So yes, the lower courts, again, will have to hear it. It will, in my opinion, slow down Jack Smith's persecution and selective prosecution of President Trump. And I don't see how this case could go forward before the election. But again, I would say that there's still issues to be discussed, such as how Jack Smith even got into this position, how we allowed our democracy, how we allowed the republic to become one that targets political opponents. The fact that we've been in front of the Supreme Court so many times is frankly a sad day for the American people. It's election interference at its finest. But I'm happy today. I think that Chief Justice Roberts made a good decision for what I'm seeing of. Obviously, I need to read it fully, but recognizing Nixon v. Fitzgerald, upholding that decision and stating that absolute immunity does exist for presidents is a good thing. It's an important thing for all Americans, both Democrat and Republican.
That's right. And to answer the question, we have to find out how Jack Smith got here. Jack Smith, the special prosecutor who was charged with going after Joe Biden's political opponent. And also, by the way, let's not leave Merrick Garland out of this. And it's like, oh, Merrick Garland, he's just, doing his job as the attorney general. He's calling balls and strikes. No. If there's one person in America other than Hillary Clinton that has a grudge against Donald Trump, it's Merrick Garland. Let's not forget, if Donald Trump had not won the election in 2016, Merrick Garland would be on the Supreme Court right now. Merrick Garland actually has a personal agenda against Donald Trump, or at least the appearance of a personal vendetta against Donald Trump. He should recuse himself from anything that involves the former president. But I'll answer your question about how Jack Smith got here. How did Jack Smith get here? Bringing up these bogus charges to be used as a weapon against a political opponent? Well, the last time anybody heard the name Jack Smith, for those of you who don't know this or don't remember, it had to do with the former governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell. Who was Bob McDonnell? Bob McDonnell won the governorship of Virginia in 2009. It was the election immediately after Barack Obama became president. And all through the next several years, Bob McDonnell was an incredibly effective and popular governor in Virginia. And people were whispering that Bob McDonnell would make a great Republican nominee for president to run against Barack Obama in 2012. And then all of a sudden, the Justice Department brought up charges against Bob McDonnell. I know, what a coincidence. And Jack Smith was the U.S. attorney who prosecuted Bob McDonnell. Well, of course, Bob McDonnell's political career was destroyed. There's no way the Republicans will nominate Bob McDonnell to run against Barack Obama now because he's facing criminal corruption charges from the federal government, from the Justice Department, from the U.S. attorney, Jack Smith. So Bob McDonnell is no longer a threat to Barack Obama. Bob McDonnell is prosecuted and he leaves office in shame, in a cloud of shame. Oh, one other thing. Bob McDonnell then appealed those charges, appealed that conviction. It made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court. And years later, after Barack Obama won re-election and Bob McDonnell, who was seen as a major threat to Barack Obama winning re-election, should he have been the Republican nominee as governor of Virginia, Bob McDonnell's career was over. Years later, the Supreme Court overturned that conviction, 8-1. Jack Smith, the same guy who brought those charges against a Republican opponent of Barack Obama. He's now the guy bringing charges against the Republican opponent of Barack Obama's third term, Joe Biden. That's how Jack Smith got here. Dana Perino reflected not just on this decision, but on a whole host of decisions that Donald Trump and Republicans and conservatives have benefited from in the waning days of this Supreme Court session.
This has been an incredible week for former President Trump.
Yeah.
If you think about last week, some of the rulings, especially the Chevron deference one, and I'm not saying that was just specifically for Trump, but if you're looking at what are the consequences and benefits of having a conservative court, if you're Republicans, that Chevron deference case was a big one in terms of regulations. You had the debate, which obviously went in his favor. And now you have the January 6th case from last week. Mm-hmm. And now this, I imagine that the Democrats are like, this is not how they saw all of this playing out.
Yeah, that's an understatement. Let's get into some details here, not just how it pertains. Well, first, let's talk about how it pertains to Donald Trump. And then we'll get into the larger picture about why this argument is so important, not just for Donald Trump and for this election cycle and Jack Smith's prosecution, but in a bigger picture, why you want a president, when acting officially, to have this kind of immunity. You don't want a president to have to make decisions as the head of the executive branch of our government, thinking, oh gosh, what happens if the next guy who comes into office will prosecute me? Okay, now you may not like that, but if you're not corrupt, this is actually a really important thing for a president to be able to have this. Julie Kelly, who covers this and many other things at the Supreme Court these days, specifically about what Jack Smith has done with January 6th and other judges have done with January 6th. She wrote about it. SCOTUS majority notes the chilling consequences of Jack Smith's J6 indictment against Donald Trump. Quoting now from the decision, criminally prosecuting a president for official conduct undoubtedly poses a far greater threat of intrusion in the authority and functions of the executive branch than simply seeking evidence in his possession, as in Burr and Nixon. The danger is akin to, indeed greater than, what led us to recognize absolute presidential immunity from civil damages liability. Let me pause there for a second. You're going to see a lot of legal pundits like Turley, like you just saw, Joe DeGenova, who I interview every week on my radio show. A lot of other people saying, yeah, we knew this was going to happen because the Supreme Court is on the record giving broad immunity to presidents for civil charges. And if you can't sue the president, you certainly shouldn't be able to put him in jail for his official acts as president. And of course, you know, I keep saying that, official acts, because that's the key. What separates an official act from an unofficial act? And we'll get into those details. Just stick with us here. But let's get back to this. That the president would be chilled from taking the bold and unhesitating action required for an independent executive. Although the president might be exposed to fewer criminal prosecutions than the range of civil damages suits that might be brought by various plaintiffs, the threat of trial, judgment, and imprisonment is a far greater deterrent. Potential criminal liability and the peculiar public opprobrium that attaches to criminal proceedings are plainly more likely to distort presidential decision-making than the potential payment of civil damages. The hesitation to execute the duties of his office fearlessly and fairly that might result when a president is making decisions under a pall of potential prosecution, McDonnell versus the United States, raises unique risks to the effective functioning of government. As Julie Kelly says, this refers to Jack Smith's prosecution that I was just telling you about of former Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, which SCOTUS overturned 8-0. Oh, that's right. It was 8-0, not 8-1. Justice Scalia had passed away. That's right. A president inclined to take one course of action based on the public interest may instead opt for another, apprehensive that criminal penalties may befall upon him. befall him upon his departure from office. And if a former president's official acts are routinely subjected to scrutiny in criminal prosecutions, the independence of the executive branch may be significantly undermined. The framers' design of the presidency did not envision such counterproductive burdens on the vigor and energy of the executive. That's the Federalist number 70. Let me translate all of that for you. Anytime a district attorney or a attorney general of a state or the next president who assumes office, anytime they want to criminally punish someone who has just been president, they could bring criminal charges against them, as we're seeing right now. It's never happened in our history. And I know you might be thinking, well, no one's ever broken the law. Oh, really? Okay. You go with that. Any one of those people, a district attorney like Alvin Bragg, or an attorney general of a state like Letitia James, or an attorney general like Merrick Garland, or through a fig leaf proxy like Jack Smith, can bring criminal charges against a president to punish them politically, to retaliate against them, to bring some sort of, political vendetta or criminal vendetta against them because they don't like them or for whatever reason, unless that president has immunity for their official acts. And when we're talking official acts, you could talk about something that has to do with executing war or enforcing the law or anything like that. You can't have it because it then gives the power of a state attorney general over a presidency. And you may say, well, then they can get away with anything. No, the founders thought of this. That's why we have the impeachment article in the Constitution. If the president misbehaves, if the president breaks the law, if the president is guilty of high crimes or misdemeanors, then that's where Congress steps in. They have jurisdiction over this. They bring impeachment. In fact, they did bring articles of impeachment against Donald Trump for his actions on January 6th. And in fact, he was acquitted in the Senate. Now, you may not like that, but that's how it's done. It took Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, and Jack Smith to upend 240 years of constitutional norms to get us to this place. Oh, and one other thing. All these Democrats who are on television right now saying, oh, this is a delay tactic. They're just trying to push it past November. You're the guy who brought the charges during the election year. And by the way, you brought the charges during the election year because you wanted it to hurt Trump politically. There is nothing in the indictments against Donald Trump as it relates to January 6th that Merrick Garland, Joe Biden, the entire country didn't already know about on January 7th. But they didn't bring charges for 3 years. They waited until the election year. They waited until Donald Trump announced he was running for office. They waited until he was doing well in the polls. That's what drove this. So if you're upset that this now pushes it past election day, that's your fault. That's your problem. Donald Trump took to Truth Social, and his reaction was pretty clear. Big win for our Constitution and democracy. Proud to be an American. Now, for those of you who are saying, well, wait a minute, when Donald Trump, as president, was contesting the results of the 2020 election, that was him acting personally as a U.S. citizen, as a candidate. He was just acting selfishly. He was just trying to protect himself. That's not an official act. Well, it is. And let me explain why. This is Donald Trump on January 6th. This is a big part of the case against Donald Trump, is the speech that he gave on the ellipse preceding the events at the Capitol. Here's a little bit of that speech.
People in a proper election. But when you see this and when you see what's happening, number one, they all say, sir, we'll never let it happen again. I said, that's good. But what about 8 weeks ago? They try and get you to go. They say, sir, in 4 years, you're guaranteed. I said, I'm not interested right now. Do me a favor. Go back 8 weeks. I want to go back 8 weeks. Let's go back 8 weeks. We want to go back and we want to get this right because we're going to have somebody in there that should not be in there and our country will be destroyed and we're not going to stand for that.
Well, he was certainly prophetic about that last part. Our country is going to be destroyed because, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? This is the president of the United States. At this moment, it happens to be Donald Trump, but that doesn't matter. He's the president of the United States. And what did he say in this speech? First of all, hey, do you notice that seal right there on the podium? What does that say? Oh, that's the official seal of the president of the United States, because he's the president. And his actions are related to his role as president. When he was sworn into, oh, what's that building behind him there? I'm trying to make it out. Can you tell what that building is? Oh, that's the White House. That's the official residence and office of the president. Looks pretty official to me, doesn't it? To you? When the president of the United States is sworn into office, he promises to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Take Donald Trump out of it for a minute. You're president of the United States, and you believe there's evidence to support the fact that the last election was corrupted, that we're about to count electoral votes from states that reached their conclusion on where their electoral votes should be distributed in a corrupt fashion, in an illegal fashion, against the laws of that state. And you know that Congress has the final say in this. The Congress does not have to accept the vote from the Electoral College if Congress also believes that there was a corrupt process. You turn to your legal advisors, and your legal advisors say, yes, Mr. President, we believe that there was a corrupt process and an unconstitutional process in Pennsylvania and in Georgia and in Wisconsin and in Michigan and in Arizona. Now, yes, certainly the election directly affects you, but set that aside for a minute. As president of the United States, if you truly believe that it was a corrupted process and it is about to be affirmed by Congress, and it's your constitutional duty to protect that process, then you're going to try to stop it. You're going to use whatever tools you have at your disposal to stop it. Legally. That's what he's doing. That's an official act. Now, let me be clear. You may think Trump is wrong. You may think that the 2020 election was pristine. You may think that every single thing that happened with mail-in ballots and drop-off boxes and covering up the windows when the counting of ballots was done and disregarding matching signatures and disregarding whether there was a proper date on the ballot, all things that happened. You may think that that's all fine and that there was no corruption and everything was pristine in the 2020 election. That doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. All that matters is that Donald Trump, acting as president of the United States, believed and had supporting evidence and advice from his legal opinion, his legal advisors, for him to believe that, in fact, it was corrupted. And as the duly sworn officer to protect and defend the Constitution, as the head of the executive branch, it was his duty to carry out officially whatever intervention he could within the law. And that's exactly what he did. And that's why all of the events on January 6th that Donald Trump was engaged in trying to circumvent or block the acceptance of Pennsylvania and Georgia, and I believe Michigan and Wisconsin, that, of course, was an official act. You may think it was wrong. You may think that he was, off his rocker. You may think that he was deluded. Doesn't matter. All that matters now is whether it was an official or unofficial act. And by definition, the executive branch's oversight and participation in the acceptance of the Electoral College results is an official act of the office. He gets immunity. Now, if he sexually harassed one of his employees while he was president, I think you could argue that that's an unofficial act because the president of the United States isn't responsible for sexually harassing people. I just throw that out there as an example, hypothetically, not that we've ever had a president who would do such a thing. So now what's really telling about this decision today is how Democrats and people of the left have reacted to it. Because let's just say the veil has come off on how they truly think the presidency should be conducted and presidential powers should be utilized. Here's Aaron Rupar, a liberal journalist who aggregates videos and such on social media. He speculates, so if Joe Biden declared today that November's election is canceled and ordered the military to keep him in power, would that be an official act? Well, see, of course it wouldn't be, but it's good to know where Aaron Rupar's head is at, isn't it? Oh, and he's not alone. Dash Dabrowski, again, an influencer. I strongly encourage Joe Biden to take advantage of his absolute immunity, which has been lawfully granted by Trump's Supreme Court justices, to do whatever official acts he needs to do in order to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. You see, this is how they think. We're the authoritarians, everybody. And this is where their mind is at. Bradley Moss, the Supreme Court just gave Biden unequivocal immunity to order the military to take action against Donald Trump today, right now. Are you seeing who the fascists are? And then in full compliance with that, they have doctored this headline, of course. The actual headline from the New York Times was, to serve his country, President Biden should step down. But instead, they doctored it to say, should drone strike Donald Trump. Thank you for showing us who you really are. It's in these desperate times when they really show their true colors. And this guy, Harry Sisson, according to the Supreme Court, Biden should now send in SEAL Team 6 to take all of them out. He should send in the military to take out Trump. He has immunity for official acts now. Isn't Donald Trump protected by the Secret Service right now? I'm pretty sure he is, not just as a former president, but as a presidential candidate. I think Mr. Sisson should clear his schedule for an interview from federal authorities for such a thing, because I don't know. Maybe he's just trying to be ironic and sarcastic and demonstrate absurdity with absurdity, but it seems to me like that could easily be interpreted as an encouragement of violence against Donald Trump. Here's an interesting take on the decision, too. Today's big winner at SCOTUS, President Richard Nixon. He would have had presumptive immunity for everything for the cover-up to protect the presidency and the Brookings Fielding break-ins, national security. Nixon's had zero role in ordering the Watergate break-in itself. Do like Dick Nixon. But that's not true. You see, the Watergate break-in was specifically about his campaign, not an official act of the presidency, right? And so this is a skewed and completely misguided interpretation of what this decision made. It's all about official and unofficial. But I will tell you who the real winners are today, other than the Constitution and presidents in the future. And, well, these guys. These guys are big winners right now. In fact, I bet you in their heart of hearts, they were sweating this thing. Oh, sure, it may have stopped Trump or delayed Trump. But that guy on the far right-hand side of the screen, that's Bill Clinton. You may remember him. Oh, there's a whole lot of things that they could go after Bill Clinton. Remember how I mentioned sexual harassment in the office place? And whether a president can be, you know, maybe a sexual assault even here and there? Yeah, he's good. That guy on the left, you may remember him. You recognize him. That's Barack Obama. In the final days of his presidency, he authorized the FBI under James Comey to go after General Mike Flynn and to continue an investigation into the next president and keep it secret from him. Now, you may think that that was a criminal act. In my heart of hearts, I do believe it was a criminal act. But Barack Obama can now say, listen, I had intelligence presented to me that the incoming president had been colluding with foreign adversaries. And as an official act of the presidency, it was my responsibility to ensure that it was investigated in case it was true. I don't like that. You probably don't like that either. But it was an official act. It was corrupt, but it was an official act. Those guys are the big winners. You talk about corrupt presidencies, and all they show you is a picture of Donald John Trump. Boy, he's an amateur. He's an amateur against those pros. In fact, one wonders what the Biden White House is cooking up right now. Because if you remember, it was the end of July of 2016 when the official FBI investigation into Donald Trump commenced. And that led to Russian collusion. It led to the dossier being released by Jake Tapper a week before inauguration. It led to the Robert Mueller investigation. And the timing is just about right now. The second it looks like Donald Trump could have a chance to win, well, it's happening right now as we speak. Take that to the bank.